The floor shimmered like a dark river under the glass wall, and the mop skimmed across it in slow arcs that caught the light. Wren watched from the bench, small hands cupped around a chipped ceramic mug painted with whales. A janitor paused, balanced on his heels, and smiled at her reflection rather than her face. "You missed a spot," she said. The mop stilled. The janitor's head turned, alarm and delight wrestling on his face. On the bench, Finn's head snapped toward his sister. Wren went still, as if even breathing might break the fragile thing she had just made as real as the mug in her hands. And then the boardroom doors at the end of the corridor opened, spilling voices and suits, and time broke again. 3 days earlier, Seattle Rain wrote commas across the glass of Ethan Cole's corner office, and he stood there with the whale's mug in his hand like it was an anchor and a wound. Everything in the room was precise. Books arranged by topic, an engineer's model of a ferry, the framed painting Marley had chosen. The crack along the mug's side, thin and white, had been there since the night the truck missed a stoplight and the world in their house divided between before and after. "Mr. Cole," the voice came through the intercom, smooth because it had to be. "Martin on line 2. Ethan cleared his throat and set the mug down carefully. "Put him through." "Ethan," Martin Lyle said, voice clipped. "Board wants audited numbers and a signed LOI with Apex by Friday, 9 a.m. That's 72 hours. This is not optional." "I'm not signing off until I've reviewed the facility's expenses you folded into Q1, Ethan said. "Facilities," Martin repeated, amused. "We're a software company, not a janitorial service. Cash is the issue. Take the deal. You're distracted. We can't afford sentiment." Ethan looked at the little couch in the corner. Wren and Finn were curled together, shoes off, their backpacks under their heads like pillows. Their school had called at 7 a.m. because the building's water main burst. The nanny texted a photo of a thermometer with 3 digits. His mother-in-law sent a heart and a prayer and a Florida forecast. Life had a way of landing everyone at his office at once. "Friday, 9, Martin said. "Or the credit line resets on Monday and we're staring at debt service no one wants, least of all your board." The line clicked off. Rain tapped the glass like someone trying not to intrude, then giving up and knocking anyway. Ethan leaned on the window frame and spoke to the city. "I know." He had been good at 2 things his entire adult life, making systems work and keeping promises. He had promised Marley he would build something that made life safer, not just faster. He had promised her in a hospital room that smelled like lemon and iron that he would stay. Hold the kids, hold the house, hold the world. Holding a world was heavy. Finn's eyes opened, big and brown and watchful. He saw his father watching him and rolled onto his side to face Wren. He touched her sleeve, fingertip light, and she made a small noise he had not heard in 9 months, a hum. She pulled the red knit scarf tighter around her nose. It belonged to Marley. It still held winter. Ethan crossed the room, knelt, and set the whale's mug near them on the table. "Hey, Bean," he said softly to Wren. "Work emergency. I have to be in the conference in 20 minutes. In the office, not far. Ava will be here. She's the calm one. I'll come back as soon as they finish the part where people love hearing themselves talk." The twins watched him without blinking. In the beginning, people told him to demand they speak. Then someone else told him not to ask at all. Silence, like rain in this city, had become the weather they dressed for. There was a knock on the half-open door. A woman in a navy suit smiled like she had learned kindness before she learned law. Ava Chen held a file in one hand and a canvas tote in the other. "I brought snacks," she said. Finn's eyes slid to the tote and then back to Wren. Wren made a tiny shrug that meant, "You can go first." He edged toward Ava. She set the tote on the coffee table and slowly took things out. Apple slices in a bag, granola bars, a pack of cards, 2 sharpened pencils, a cheap notebook with a whale on the cover. Ethan met Ava's eyes, there at the office. "I figured," she said. "Martin's been making noise. I'm here to make less noise." "What is he doing?" "Pushing a vote," she said. He floated a rumor to a reporter at the Business Ledger. "Leadership instability. He wants the board nervous enough to rush into Apex's arms." "And we can't rush." "We can't sign a bad math," Ava said simply. "You have 72 hours. Let me do the law, you do the promises." He laughed, sharp and tired. "Is that what we call fatherhood now? We could call it survival," she said. "Go, I'll keep them alive." "I'm very good at snacks." Ethan squeezed her shoulder. Thank you. He bent down and touched Ren's scarf, and she didn't pull away. He looked at Finn and raised his eyebrows. Finn nodded. Small victories. When he stepped into the hallway, the fluorescent lights hummed like a beehive. A man in a gray polo was buffing a water ring from the floor outside the elevators. He was older than Ethan by a decade, with careful hands and a face that graded from kind to tired depending on which way you looked. Morning, the man said. Morning, Ethan said. The man pointed with his chin at the office. Your kids? Yes, good kids, he said, as if he knew and was stating a fact about the weather. I'm Ray. If you need anything, the mop and I make the problems look small. Ethan smiled for real and then kept moving. In the conference room, men and women in expensive jackets arranged their faces into concern. Martin's was the most composed. He was the kind of man who never lost a tie clip. I won't drag this out, Martin said. Apex's LOI is at 1.3 billion. It clears debt. It sets us up for long-term stability. The market is punishing companies like ours. Cash is king. We need to move. What about the inflated facilities line? Ethan asked. It jumped from 800 to 3 million in a quarter. For janitorial services and security, that's not seasonal. The Fortune Tower renegotiation, Martin said. The building passed through base expense increases. The pandemic left us with liabilities. Show us, Ava said. Backups, invoices, actuals. It's in the binder, Martin said, as if that ended things. Look, we can do governance later. For now, the board needs a yes. Friday at 9, no extensions. After the meeting, Ethan walked out with Ava. He's not just pushing, she murmured. He's hiding. Can you pull the contracts? I can request them, she said. But if he's running it through a pass-through vendor, we'll have to show cause. We need someone inside the building action, not the finance story. Like who? Ava raised her eyebrows toward the man with the mop down the hall. He was scrubbing gum with the patience of a monk. Back in the office, Finn had fallen asleep again with a deck of cards fanned under his cheek. Ren sat at the table with the notebook Ava had brought. She was drawing a whale with a black pencil, the kind that made soft lines. She pressed harder where the fin curved. The whale's mug sat near her. The crack climbed up the side like a lightning strike. Ethan stood by the door and watched his daughter draw. He had learned to let silence be shelter. He had learned the language of her hands. When she lifted the pencil and squinted, that meant she was counting without numbers. When she traced the crack with the tip of her finger, that meant she was remembering. He took a breath and let it out slow. I have to go upstairs, he whispered. I promise I'll be back in 20 minutes. If I'm not here, Ava will be. She knows how to make judges less scary and Coco more hot. Ren set the pencil down and looked at him. The scarf made her eyes look like someone had drawn two lakes with a fine-tipped pen. I'll stay, he said. I'll stay with you. Even if it looks like I left for a minute, I'll stay. He didn't know if promises counted when you were leaving and also staying. He only knew that even saying the thing made the floor under him feel less like water. In the hallway, he almost ran into the janitor. Ray stepped back, raising one hand as if to ward off blame. Sorry, Ethan said. Nothing to be sorry for, Ray said. He nodded toward the office again. They like whales. My wife did, Ethan said, the words still catching in his throat. She taught art, sometimes in the kitchen. She painted that mug with them at a Saturday market. It seemed like a good idea then, giving 2 toddlers ceramic. We glued it once already. Good glue's almost religion, Ray said. He glanced at the mug just visible on the table. Looks like it's cracked again. Yeah, Ethan said. I should stop giving my kids breakable hope. Ray looked at him for a long second, and whatever he saw there made his gaze turn from kind to steady. Hope breaks so it can be mended better. You fix floors, Ethan said. I fix what's in front of me, Ray said. Sometimes the floor is the only thing people notice. He hesitated. If you need a quiet place later, the East Service corridor stays warm, vents there run hot, good for Coco. Thank you, Ethan said. Ray nodded once, then went back to work. The day paced itself like a forced march. Ethan reviewed code and strategy decks and vendor lists until the numbers crawled in his eyes like insects. He checked on the twins every 30 minutes. Finn played Go Fish with Ava, cheating beautifully by holding his cards upside down. Ren drew whales, then dots, then boxes, then little lines inside the boxes. At one point she stood and pressed the sleeve of the scarf against the window until her breath fogged a circle. She drew a whale in the fog. When Ethan returned from an afternoon meeting dominated by men in zip-up vests who said the word synergy like a prayer, Wren was standing on tiptoe, reaching for the top shelf of a cabinet. The whale's mug clinked against something and then slipped. Her fingers closed late. The mug hit the table edge and cracked along a second white thread that met the first, a quiet star. Wren froze. It wasn't the sound that hurt, it was the memory. The mug had been in the kitchen, the night lights flashed outside, and an officer stood in their doorway with a face like concrete. Wren had been holding a spoon. Coco had been on the stove. Marley had been on the road coming home. Ethan crossed the space in 3 long steps. He didn't tell Wren it was just a mug. He didn't tell her it didn't matter. He sank to his knees and took both her hands in his. He breathed slow and waited for her to follow. "I'm here," he said softly. "I'm staying." Her fingers moved once inside his, like a bird testing air. Then she pulled free, wrapped the scarf around her mouth, and went under the table. Finn crawled in after her without looking at anything else. They were a team even in retreat. Ethan stared at the shards. He reached toward them and stopped as if there were a rule about touching what broke in front of you. There was a knock at the door. Ray stood there, hat in his hands, somehow making himself smaller than a man his size should be able to be. "I heard something," he said. "We're fine," Ethan said, because that's what fathers from movies said. He glanced at the table again. "We will be." Ray stepped over the threshold like he had been invited into a church. He looked under the table where the scarf made a cave and where 2 pairs of eyes watched him. "Hi," he said, crouching. "I'm Ray. You don't know me yet, that's okay. I don't know you yet either." He let that sit there like a truth that wouldn't break. "Sometimes I clean up messes, sometimes I make them. Today I can do one of those." He reached for the bag at his waist and pulled out a small broom and a dustpan. He looked at Ethan. "May I?" "Yes," Ethan said. It came out like permission and like thank you. Ray worked slow. He made a sweep into the pan, but he didn't scrape the pieces across the table. He coaxed them. He picked up the largest piece with his fingers and looked at the painting of a whale's eye at its center. "Pretty," he said. "Someone who loved whales painted this." He laid the piece in the pan like a found thing, not trash. He gathered the rest the same way, then stood, held the dustpan in his hands like it weighed 10 pounds, and looked at Ethan. "I can bring this back," he said. "It's broken," Ethan said. "Me too," Ray said, matter of fact. "It didn't stop me from working." He tipped his head toward the hall. "The service corridor's warm, vents, stay there for a bit. I'll come find you in 10 minutes, 15 if the glue and I argue." "What glue?" Ethan asked, because sometimes just asking a small question kept a man from asking the larger ones that waited behind it with fists. "The kind that makes old things honest," Ray said, as if that were an answer with a brand name. In the East Service corridor, the air did run warm. You could lay your cheek against the metal and feel the hum of the building's breathing. Ethan led the twins to a bench that probably had once been a step ladder. He sat between them, their shoulders against his sides like small anchors. Ava sat opposite, hands folded. She didn't say anything. She had the rare lawyer's skill of knowing when words cost too much. 10 minutes stretched into 15. Wren traced the seam between 2 tiles with her finger, back and forth. Finn played with the deck of cards on the floor, flipping them and making towers that fell if you breathed wrong. The sound of a floor machine buzzed from far enough away that it might have been a bee in a book. When Ray rounded the corner, he held something wrapped in a blue shop towel and a brown paper cup with steam escaping. His eyes scanned the kids first, then Ethan, as if he were measuring whether the glue had to hold more than ceramic. "I made it just warm," he said. "Not hot. Learned that the hard way with my own niece when she was little. Hot cocoa makes new tears." He set the cup down and unwrapped the towel slowly, as if something inside might be scared of light. When the towel fell back, the whale's mug sat in his palm whole. Along the old crack in the new one, a line of gold wandered like a river through snow. The handle was steady. The whales patched together looked like they had learned something. Wren leaned forward. Her eyes found the cracks first and then the whales, as if the mending were the point and the picture the lesson. "I used a bit of epoxy," Ray said. "And some metallic powder my niece uses for crafts. Japanese folks call it kintsugi. You don't hide the break, you show it and slide a little gold through." He held out the mug. He didn't push it into her hands. He hovered like someone offering a bird a seed in an open palm. Wren reached. Her fingers touched the gold seam and then pressed lightly until she learned its strength. She brought the mug to her nose and closed her eyes. Cocoa and glue and heat. Her breathing changed, as if her lungs had remembered a specific rhythm they had used in a kitchen at night. Ray took the floor machine's handle and tilted it until the roller hummed at a lower note. He watched Ren's eyes and, in a voice that was barely a voice, not a melody but something like it, he hummed. Long notes that matched the pitch of the machine and the rumble of the air vent and the small, careful silence of a hallway where nobody meant to cry. Ren tilted the mug. Finn set 2 fingers on its base as if he were bracing a boat. They drank together, 2 sips, then 3. Ren's left hand rubbed the scarf's edge until the yarn warmed. "Thank you," Ethan said, and the words were not big enough. "Just glue," Ray murmured. He wiped his hands on the towel, and a machine that sings when you ask nice. He started to leave, then hesitated and looked at Ethan. "Mr. Cole," he said, the formality there for respect. "I've been here a long time. Our crew keeps logs, times, doors, deliveries, things the building cares about. Your CFO vendor invoices and the bodies in these hallways don't match. I don't pretend I know numbers at your level, but I know the smell of a story that doesn't wash." Ethan's breath halted in the oldest part of his chest. "What do you have?" "Logins, a photo or 2, a voice on my phone saying I didn't see anything, which is funny since I was the only one there seeing." He lifted one hand. "I also have a job I like to keep." Ava leaned forward. "We can protect you. I'll take copies. Keep your originals in your locker. Don't email. Bring them to me in person." Ray nodded. "Yes, ma'am." He turned to go, then looked back once at Ren. She was studying him, eyes sharp in a way that had scared doctors and won over one substitute teacher in the fall who had understood patterns like other people understood music. Ray tapped his own temple and smiled. "You see, don't you?" Ren didn't nod. She didn't move, but her gaze slid toward Ethan's office, the place where binders lived, and then toward the wide window that looked down on the loading dock where trucks came and went. She set the mug on her lap, reached for the cheap notebook on the bench, and drew 3 boxes in a row. She colored 2 of them lightly with the pencil. She left the third alone. Blue, blue, green. She added numbers under the boxes, 70, 70, 70. Then she crossed them out and drew 10, 10 with a slow hand and a small curve at her mouth that might have been the idea of a smile. "Boring things," Ava whispered. "The best clues." Finn set his hand on the page and smiled at her too. He didn't need words to say, "I see you seeing." That night, Ethan stood on his deck above Elliott Bay and let the cold find him. The kids were inside, asleep in his bed like a pair of commas in a sentence he wasn't ready to end. The whale's mug, mended, sat on the kitchen counter under a towel like a small animal that needed warmth to keep breathing. The city lights made a constellation no map had bothered to learn. Somewhere across the water, a ferry moaned. He held the railing and thought about the boardroom table, the way men like Martin made their plans, the way numbers turned into weapons. Behind him, the sliding door opened, bare feet patted on wood. Ren came to the doorway, scarf in both hands like she was considering whether to bring winter with her to spring. "You should be asleep," Ethan said without turning. He felt her lean into his hip. Later he would remember that exact weight. "I made a promise today," he said softly, as if promises were like wishes and you could break them by saying them loud. "I told you I'd stay, that I wouldn't sign anything that would make me lie to you later. I meant it, even if it means I lose my job, even if that scares me." Ren's fingers tightened on the scarf. She didn't speak, but she made one sound, small and warm, almost like a vowel that had been sleeping and woke to find it had grown. It slid into his ribs and stayed there like a brand. "Okay," he whispered. "Okay." In the morning, the building had a different smell. Fear, desperation, expensive cologne. Martin moved through the halls like a solution that got there before the problem. "You can't bring children into a crisis," he said when he saw the twins in Ethan's doorway. "I didn't bring the crisis," Ethan said. "You did." Martin's mouth smiled, his eyes didn't. "Board wants you at 9, some of us are on time." At 8:33, a guard wearing one of the new jackets that said security in white block letters walked toward the office with 2 other men in blue shirts that said facilities. Ray followed them, hands open at his sides. "Mr. Cole," the guard said, "we need to clear the hallways, no kids near the boardroom, fire code." "Fire code says a lot of things," Ava said. She stepped into the doorway. We'll be in the public corridor, you don't make rules about that. The guard lifted his chin. I do today. On whose order? Ava asked. He didn't answer. He looked at Ray. You, downstairs, you're not needed on 12. Ray didn't look at Ethan when he spoke. He looked at Ren because that seemed like the kind of man he was now. I'll stay down the hall, he said. If you need me, I'll hear you. Ren watched his mouth form the words. He touched his chest with 2 fingers and then, startling himself with his own certainty, he added, promise. Ren blinked. The scarf moved as if a breath had caught and then detonated into something bigger. She lifted a hand and touched 2 fingers to her own chest, answering with the same sign for yes that they had once invented between a mother and a daughter who preferred drawing to talking. Ethan, Ava, and the twins walked toward the boardroom through a corridor the color of a simple idea. Chairs lined the glass on one side. The city ran past on the other. At the far end, doors already whispered with the sound of impatient people. Ray fell in step behind them, farther away than a friend and closer than a stranger. He kept his cap in his hand. He walked like a man who felt the shape of his own promise under the skin of his day. Halfway down the corridor, Ren stepped to the wall. She crouched and set the whale's mug on the floor. She watched Ray's mop slide past them, leaving a perfect oval of dark, then lighter, then dark again. She tracked the arcs. She counted the seconds between passes like beads. She studied the reflection of the lights in the wet. Ray approached the place where his lines overlapped. A streak remained faint. He lifted the mop and cast a quick glance over his shoulder like a boy who had been taught to check his work. His eyes met hers. He smiled a little and on purpose missed it by a fraction. You missed a spot, Ren said. Her voice was soft and certain and exactly the shape of everything Ethan had wanted and feared and refused to demand. It slid along the corridor and found every space that had been waiting for it. Ray's eyes warmed enough that they looked like someone had put a light behind them. He made a show of going back over the spot, pressing a little more, washing to the edges like finishing a painting. He didn't look up again, because sometimes when a miracle stands up on 2 legs, you pretend it's normal so it doesn't run off. Ethan made a sound he could not call a laugh or a sob. Ava put a hand on his arm. Finn grabbed his sister's scarf like a rope that could pull them both into the same small boat. The boardroom doors opened. Martin stood there, flawless, as if nothing in the world could surprise him. Ready? Yes, Ethan said. He meant something larger. Inside, the room was a stage where chairs played people who were sure they were the story. Ruth Hargrove sat at the head, eyes sharp. Several directors tuned their phones, faces in the neutral shape of money. Martin began without being asked. We will dispense with preamble. Apex is on the line. We're signing or we're not. If we're not, Mr. Cole should be aware that confidence is fragile. We'll get to Apex, Ruth said, voice even. First, Martin, the facility line. Ava asked. I'm asking again. The invoices are in the binder, he said. He tapped a tab. Orca Facilities Services. He smiled faintly. Fitting for our city, no. Ethan's jaw tightened. Orca, funny name. Martin shrugged. Marketing. Ethan lifted the binder and flipped to the tab. Inside, dozens of invoices were stacked. Each had neat type, a blue logo of a whale tail, and a line item for Q1 comprehensive cleaning and security supplemental. 70 pallets of supplies last week, and the week before, and the week before. 70 pallets, Ethan said, 3 weeks in a row. Yes, Martin said. Prices and supply chain. I'd be happy to have our controller walk you through the math if we counted, a small voice said from inside the doorway. Heads turned. Ren stood in the frame, whale's mug in both hands, scarf loose. Finn's hand touched the small of her back like a little engine pushing them forward. A security guard half turned, then stopped when Ruth lifted one finger without looking at him. We counted, Ren said, and she stopped, as if asking herself whether the air would let her keep going. It did. You said 70, that's 7 rows of 10. We saw 2 rows, they were 10. 2 tens is not 7 tens. No one breathed. It was the quiet you got right before a storm when even birds got out of the way. Excuse me, Martin said, polite without heat. She's referring to the pallets on the dock, Ava said. She had a view from Ethan's office. 2 rows of 10 pallets delivered on April 10th, not 70. Children are not auditors, Martin said. Neither are made-up vendors, Ava said. Ruth's eyes slid to Martin with a look like someone adjusting a microscope. Explain. Orca is a pass-through, he said. We use them because the building's contract doesn't cover a lot of what we need since. Blue, blue, green, Wren said. She lifted the mug like a talisman and pointed with her chin toward the shelf behind Martin where binders leaned. Blue, blue, green, blue, blue, green. You didn't make it random, you made a pattern. Martin followed her gaze almost involuntarily. The binders were organized by quarter and function. Facilities, legal, finance, patterns were efficient. He had always liked them because they hid in the open. We use color coding, he said. Not like that, Ava said. She was on her feet now. Ray stepped in from the hall, hat in his hands, shoulders squared. He looked small in a room like this and also bigger than men in suits. My name is Raymond Porter, he said, voice even. I clean floors and change trash and sometimes see the things other folks don't have time to see. This is a board meeting, Martin said coolly. We need truth, Ruth said. Let him speak. Ray moved to the table's end like a man laying a repair at the feet of the people who had broken something and forgotten the pieces. He opened his palm. A phone sat there, old and nicked. I use the building app to log tasks, he said. There's a dock camera, too, for security. April 10th, 7:12 in the evening, the camera shows 2 rows of pallets. 20. We stored them in aisle B. Then Mr. Lyle's assistant and 2 other men came in with boxes, not from the dock, from a car in the alley. We signed a log. They told me to clear the shredder that night. I tried to refuse. I got told I didn't see anything. He tapped the phone. Audio filled the room, tinny and clean enough to recognize a voice. Leave the logs where they are, Ray, a man said on the recording. Building management doesn't need extra paper. This is above your pay grade. You want to keep your job, you didn't see this. Whose voice is that? Ruth asked, not looking away from Martin's face. I'll let the board decide, Ava said. Her hands did not shake, but we have more. Keycard records showing Martin entering the dock hallway after hours. App logs with metadata. Mr. Porter has originals. He did not email them. We're all in this room. We can keep it that way. Martin laughed, low and wrong. You're taking the word of a janitor and a child. Yes, Ruth said, if the janitor has logs and the child has eyes. The invoices are legitimate, Martin said, but the edges of his certainty had frayed. He flipped to a page and pointed. See, 70 pallets, 70, it's right here. Wren stepped closer. The board members saw her face now. It wasn't the face of a prop in a CEO play. It was a face like a map, showing where the light hit the high places and the hollows kept due. 2 10s, she said quietly. Not 7 10s, and all your 70s end in the same 6, 70.6 always. If you had different pallets, the decimal wouldn't stay, it would wobble. Ruth leaned in. The board member to her left reached for a pair of glasses as if good sight required permission. It wobbles in the real world, Ruth said. Doesn't it, Martin? Martin swallowed. His neck moved. His eyes flicked toward the door where he always assumed an exit would be because there always had been one before. Security, he said. Please remove Mr. Porter. This is an executive session. 2 guards stepped forward. Ethan moved too without thinking about it, a father's body putting itself between a promise and a threat. He's my guest, Ethan said. And he's protected under Washington State's whistleblower policy and our own internal code. I signed it. So did you. Policy doesn't trump, truth trumps, Ava said, and so does law. It might have ended there with air and speech in equal measure. Instead, the guard on the left bumped the edge of the table with his hip hard. A binder slipped, something on the table tipped. Wren lunged. The whale's mug slid along the wood and fell. It hit the carpet and rolled. The handle held. The gold seam kept its river. A small line, new, cracked along the base. A new white vein. Wren's face changed, not to fear, to memory, which was worse because it was heavier. Finn moved faster than anyone else in the room, a small blur. He reached the mug first. He crouched over it and wrapped both arms around it like it was a dog who might run. He looked up at his father, eyes wild and certain. No, he said. The word cut the room into before and after again. Ethan went to his knees and put his hand on the back of his son's neck, warm. We're okay, he said, and meant none of the other things people say in rooms like this. He looked at Wren, who was standing now with her hands at her sides as if they didn't know what to do if there wasn't a pencil to hold. He cleared his throat and stood. Ruth, he said, if you let this man walk out, I walk after him. If you sign with Apex today, I resign. If you keep him, we finish this in the light. The room reeled. That was not how the script went. CEO bargained in numbers, not in children and glue and men with mops. Ruth tapped her pen once against the table. It made a small sound with big edges. "Sit down, Martin," she said. "Ava, take custody of the logs. Security, leave this room unless I call you back." The guard stepped out. The door swung shut. The room exhaled. Martin smiled like a man telling a story to a child he didn't think would check the ending. "The logs are dated," Ava said. "With metadata. April 10, 7:12 p.m. Dock camera. April 8, 9:01 p.m. Keycard. I have copies. Mr. Porter has originals. If you want to force me to subpoena, we can, but we're here. We're members of the same house. Let's not set it on fire." Martin's jaw moved. The muscles near his ear jumped. "We'll sue." "We'll investigate," Ruth said. "And you'll step aside while we do." "On what grounds?" he snorted. "On the grounds that I'm the chair and I vote now," Ruth said. She looked around the table. I, said a voice, then another, and another. The eyes stacked like pallets that actually existed in the real world. Martin looked at Ethan, hatred and surprise sharing space. "You can't save this company with sentiment." "I can't save it with lies," Ethan said. Martin gathered his stack of papers and tried to gather his dignity. He failed at both. He walked out with his tie neat and his hands empty. It wasn't over. It never is with men like that, who believe exits exist for them because they have always found one. But the room's center of gravity had shifted. The numbers hummed a different note. The air felt like something other than fear. Ava began to speak about process. Ruth spoke about independent audits and immediate calls. Someone mentioned the press. Ethan listened with a part of his brain that could still language. The other part was in the corner where Ren and Finn sat on the floor with Ray, who had carefully lifted the mug, examined the new line, and held out his hand as if to ask permission before he touched anything. "Just a nick," he murmured. "Nothing we can't tell the truth about with a little more gold." Ren exhaled a breath that sounded like forgiveness for something no one in this room could claim to deserve but everyone needed and no one would ask for. And then it all went wrong again. Because life rarely delivers a win without checking whether you really meant the promise in the first place. Security came back with a new face, not the building guard this time. A man in a suit with a badge clipped to his belt and a folder in his hand. He didn't step into the room. He stood at the door as if doorways were where he lived. "Mr. Cole," he said. "Yes," Ethan said, dread already building because he knew the shape of this man's posture. He had seen it in living rooms and courtrooms and on sidewalks near schools. "I'm from the county," the man said, quiet enough to keep shame from knocking and loud enough to make sure everyone heard it anyway. "We received an anonymous concern about children in a corporate environment during a business dispute." Ren went still. Finn's hand found hers and held hard. "We're fine," Ethan said, "because that was what you said." "This is not an accusation," the man said kindly. "It's a welfare check. I need to see a safe space. I need to hear from a caregiver and, if they're willing, from the children." Ava stepped up beside Ethan. "I'm counsel," she said. "We're happy to cooperate. The children have a pediatrician, a school counselor, and a grief therapist. We can show you records." The man nodded. "Let's find a quiet room." Ruth stood. "Use my office," she said. She looked at Ethan, not unkindly, but the math in her head had shifted again. "We'll reconvene after." In Ruth's office, the carpet was softer and the art more expensive. The whale's mug sat on the edge of a low table like a witness. Ethan sat in a chair that was too small. The county worker opened his folder and took out a form. "What are their names?" he asked. "And what's your plan for the next 48 hours?" Ren and Finn sat side by side on a couch, their shoulders pressed together hard enough that you would have had to use a crowbar to separate them. Ren's scarf fell open. In the air between her and the mug, light flickered from the slat blinds like small blades of sun. "Ren and Finn Cole," Ethan said. "They're 7. They lost their mother 9 months ago. We have school, we have a therapist. We have this building because their school had a water main break today. Our nanny is sick. Their grandmother flies in tonight. We're in a company crisis, which I probably don't need to explain to you, but I am not leaving them." The man looked him in the eye. "I can see that." He turned to Ren. "Do you want to tell me anything, or show me, or say nothing at all? Nothing is allowed." Ren's hands moved on her knees, left, right, left, like she was smoothing invisible cloth. She looked at Ethan. He didn't nod because he didn't want to push. He thought about promises like rails on a bridge. She took a breath. "We have Coco," she said. It wasn't a sentence that would satisfy a state. It was a sentence that satisfied a child's need to tell the truth about the important thing in the room. The man smiled, mostly with his eyes. "That sounds very safe," he said. He closed the folder. "This is a courtesy check. I'm writing that the children are with their father in a public space with support. I'm recommending a follow-up with their therapist, and I'm signing off. Mr. Cole, my job is to keep kids safe, not to be used by executives who make anonymous calls. Good luck." He left without making the air heavier, which was a gift. Ethan let his forehead fall into his palm for a second and breathed like it might be the last thing he got to control. Ava squeezed his shoulder. Ray stood in the doorway, hat in hand, as if hats were prayers. "You kept your promise," Ren said to Ethan. He didn't realize until that moment that sometimes you kept a promise and only found out when the person you made it to told you it happened. By late afternoon, evidence had stacked like pallets that weren't imaginary. Ava called the building's third-party security and pulled keycard logs legally. A camera tech named Dan drove across town and delivered a flash drive with video because he didn't trust email. Ruth called a special meeting for 7 p.m. An auditor showed up with a laptop that had stickers from a rock band that no longer existed. Martin's lawyer tried to stall. The board moved anyway. At 6, Ray took a break because men who worked with their hands knew that you couldn't ask them to do their job without refilling the body that did it. He went to the service corridor and ate a sandwich from a paper bag. When he finished, he took the whale's mug in both hands like a man asking to borrow something precious again. Ren watched him. He didn't ask with words. He lifted the mug an inch. She nodded. At 7, the board reconvened. The room was heavier. More laws walked in with it. Ava put the logs on the table. The man from the county had left a card with his cell number. He had meant it when he said good luck. Ruth led the meeting like a jury foreman. No anger. Just lines that did not wobble. Videos played. Voices we all pretend we don't record sounded like truth told after it's too late to unsay it. Martin tried once more to buy time. To spin. To say that the pallets were delivered to a second location that didn't exist. To say that decimals wobble in their own way if you have enough MBA in the room. The auditor cleared her throat. "The invoices are fakes," she said. "Basic graphic work, wrong kerning, reused template. The file metadata shows a document created on April 8 on a machine registered to Martin Lyle and edited again at 7:08 p.m. April 10. The dock camera shows nothing arriving at those times. The key card shows access after hours. This is not complex." Ruth folded her hands. "Motion to remove Mr. Lyle as CFO pending full investigation." "Aye," said the room. Martin's shoulders sagged as if some part of him had finally caught up to what he had done. "You'll kill the deal," he said, but it sounded like a man repeating a line that had always worked before and finding it suddenly small. "We'll fix the company," Ruth said. "And we'll report what we have to the state. Ava draft it." Ava nodded. "Already started." Ethan stood only long enough to say, "We will be fine." He didn't know if he meant the company or the children or the building or himself. It didn't matter. He meant it for all. At 9, he walked out into the corridor and sat on the floor with Ren and Finn and Ray. He didn't ask Ray to go home even though it was past 7 o'clock and no one paid him for this kind of overtime. "Ray," Ethan said softly, "I don't know how to repay you." Ray shrugged. "You don't." He glanced at Ren. "You make sure she gets to keep making patterns." Ren gulped a breath like a swimmer surfacing. She lifted the mug and turned it so the gold caught the light. "You made the break pretty." Ray shook his head. "It was already beautiful. I just told the truth about what happened to it." Finn leaned his head against his sister's shoulder. "It sings," he said. "What does?" Ray asked. "The floor machine," Finn said. "It sings like Grandpa's truck." Ray chuckled. "Then it's telling us we did fine." 2 days later, on Friday morning, the Business Ledger printed a story that used the words internal investigation and has stepped aside. They also used the words surprising source and janitor in a way that made Ray wince and proud at the same time. At 9, the board met. They did not sell the company to Apex. They appointed an interim CFO. They retained a forensic team. Ruth told Ethan they would find someone steady and true. In the hallway afterward, she touched his arm. "You're a good father," she said. Ethan nodded like a man who had been told a thing he wanted to be more than almost anything else. Make a plan, Ruth added. For the children, for the company, we'll stand behind you on both. On Friday afternoon, Ethan sat in his office with a form in front of him. It was a caregiver authorization. The state offered a simple paper that let a parent name a person to pick up a child from school, take them to the doctor, sign for field trips. He had never filled one out because he had never needed to until he did. "Ray," he said when the man stood in the doorway, "do you have a minute?" Ray looked down at his shirt as if to be sure it was an okay shirt to wear when a man asked him a question like that. He stepped inside and took off his hat. "I have more than a minute," he said. "I have most of the day if you need it. They gave me the morning because of you know." He gestured vaguely toward the fact that his name had been in a news story against his will. Ethan turned the paper so it faced Ray. "I want to list you as an authorized caregiver for pickup, for doctor's appointments if we're in a pinch, not a parent, not a replacement, a person they can run to who knows where the warm corridor is." Ray looked at the paper like it might decide to change shape. "Mr. Cole," he said, and the Mr. made it formal because it mattered. "You sure?" "I'm sure," Ethan said. "Ava ran a background check because she is Ava. It's clean. You raised a niece. You fix what's in front of you. You kept a promise you didn't have to make to my daughter." Ray swallowed. He looked at Ren. She had her chin on the edge of the table and her eyes on him like she was measuring whether he would run if they said yes. He lifted the pen. "Okay," he said. "I'll stay," he signed. Then he looked up, almost afraid to hope. "Promise." Ren smiled with her mouth and her eyes, and the room eased like rain turning to mist. "Promise," she said. That night, Ethan sat with a new document beside the form. The top read the Marley Cole Promise Fund. Below, it said $1 million initial commitment, and it listed a mission as simple as a streetlight. To support scholarships and emergency grants for building and service workers' families, childcare stipends, school supplies, art classes, and quiet emergencies that often go unheard. He could run a fund and run a company and raise 2 kids and breathe, probably not all on the same day. But he could start. Ava helped him set it up so it would run even if he didn't. They announced it to a small room because sometimes good things didn't need cameras. Ray stood at the back awkwardly, like a man holding a party he didn't know was for him. Ren held the whale's mug in both hands and looked at the gold lines like a map she planned to follow. In the weeks that followed, the company stepped out of a shadow that had made tiles slick. The National Guard of Accountants came. They found more than they wanted and less than they feared. The press got tired and left. Apex sent their congratulations through a mouth that had been ready to eat them. The audit finished. They saved money in places that didn't involve lies. They hired a new CFO named Leela who had hands like a teacher and a brain like a vault. On a Tuesday in late May, Ren and Finn went back to school full-time. Their therapist taught Ethan how to say less in a way that meant more. They started using words like processing and integration, and Ethan learned to live with the idea that some things got integrated and some things didn't. He stopped waiting for the day when the house would be like it had been before. He started making cocoa again with the mug set on a saucer like a small boat that might slosh. A judge in the county court signed off on the caregiver form formally and said words into a microphone about the best interest of the child and how communities are built with more than blood. Ethan asked Ray to come, and he wore a tie that didn't match his shirt because he had borrowed it from his nephew and it didn't matter, and the judge smiled at all of them because some days this job let her file good orders. In July, on a morning when the bay flipped flashes of light like fish learning to fly, they all went to the waterfront. Ray brought a paper bag with donuts. Ren had the scarf in her backpack, though she didn't need it, because sometimes you carry winter in summer because you want to be sure you can find it later. Finn carried the deck of cards, worn to softness now. They sat on a bench by the rail. A ferry moaned somewhere close. A whale-watching boat nosed toward the sound. "Whales aren't guaranteed," Ray said. "Tour says that on the brochure. No refunds for skies that don't care." Ren leaned forward, elbows on knees. The whale's mug sat beside her with cocoa, not too hot. The gold line glowed like a small sun. "Whales are like words," Finn said. "They come when they want. Or like promises," Ren said quietly. "They come because we keep calling them." A gull landed near their feet and pecked a donut crumb with the pomp of royalty. Ray made a gentle shooing motion. The gull turned one bright eye toward them and then moved aside like a man who knew when a meal wasn't his. Ethan stood with his hands in his pockets and watched the children and the man who had become the thing you didn't know you needed until it arrived. The water was a constant and a change. The ferry honked at a small boat like a dad reminding kids that intersections weren't jokes. A woman at the next bench spilled her coffee as she turned to keep a toddler from climbing the rail. A dark circle spread on the wood near her foot. Ray stood without making it into a rescue and reached into his shoulder bag. He took out a folded paper towel and stepped toward the spill. He pressed the towel down with his whole palm slow, so the liquid rose and then disappeared into the fibers. Ren watched him. She tipped her head, measuring a line only she could see. The towel lifted. A faint ring remained at the edge. "You missed a spot," she said, and this time he laughed because sometimes repetition meant we had made it through the worst and found the joy in a line we thought would always cut. He pressed the towel again. He rubbed to the edge. "There," he said. "Not there," she said. "There." She pointed at a place he couldn't see until she told him. He pressed again, and this time the wood looked new under his hand. Ren lifted the whale's mug. She took a sip. She set it down and looked at Ethan. "You kept your promise," she said. He nodded because he didn't trust his mouth to do words without making a fool of him in public. He reached over and tugged a strand of her hair very gently like Marley used to if the kids leaned into her when they painted. They sat like that a while, like a family that had built a structure out of glue and gold in other people's hands. When the whale watching boat returned an hour later, the passengers clapped. Someone had seen something, or not. It didn't matter. Ray stood and stretched and looked at the kids. "Back to school drop-off tomorrow," he said. "Your dad says he's running late to a breakfast where people use the word synergy when they mean bagels." Ren made a face that too much of the adult world translated as disdain and that Ray, to his credit, had learned meant only, why do people lie to themselves about what they're doing? She looked at the mug. She looked at the water. She looked at the man with the mop who made a floor sing and a break beautiful. "Ray," she said. He paused. "Yes, ma'am. You can miss a spot," she said. "The world won't end," he grinned. "That's the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me about my job." "Only not the whales," Finn said. "Don't miss the whales." Ray tipped his hat. "I won't." He picked up his bag and they started walking back toward the car, a small procession without trumpets. The mug clinked softly against Ren's backpack water bottle. The gold line caught the sun and threw it back brighter. Moral takeaway: repair doesn't hide the break, it honors it. When we keep our promises and listen to those we overlook, we build families and companies that can hold.